everyone, and good whatever wonderful moment of this day you are enjoying on your time zones. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I do see that there are already comments popping in, and that's such a joy just to have a look and see where everyone is listening to us or watching us from. Please do keep those comments coming. Just tell us where you are right now and help us travel vicariously around the world. We are kicking off a new week, part of our February series. And today we will be spending 1 hour with an amazing lineup of speakers talking about audience awareness and even more so about tailoring HR messaging for maximum impact. My name is Minola Jacques. I am a journalist by trade. I am a change manager by choice, and I am an absolute Hacking HR supporter by calling. We have Jessa with us, working her magic backstage, and I will ask her now to help me and fill the screen with our panelists. And as they are getting used to seeing their faces next to each other, what I will do, I will continue to welcome everybody in the audience. And also, please do consider the comments just as much your conversation space as it is our panels. So whatever it is that we are discussing with our panelists, please do drop your thoughts, your ideas, your own stories, your own tips and tricks, and do help us keep this community learning from each other. Now, you know what I say, that Hacking HR hours do feel shorter than regular hours, and we will try to make the most out of our time here today. What I will do, I will just kick us off by passing the e-mic around as you appear on my screen clockwise, and I will ask you first, just please kindly shortly introduce yourselves. And as I was thinking about this panel today, I got curious about one thing. Out of all the possible HR messaging types out there, what is one that is really near and dear to your heart? What type of HR messages do you resonate with most? Do you enjoy spreading across the organization? So, without further ado, Dipti, it's so good to see you. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Manola, and I'm happy to be here. I am Deepthi Lewis from India. I head HR for Conviva APAC. I have over 20 years of HR experience. And as always, it's wonderful to be a part of Hacking HR. It's over a year since I've been a part of this wonderful group. Coming to the message that is most dear and close to my heart, I think there are a lot, but I think I love the ones where employees and leaders back up what you've spoken about and talk about their experiences, and then it somehow validates whatever you have done. So I think those are the ones that I think are the best.
Thank you so very much. Sheila, good to see you. Welcome.
Hello, how are you doing? Great to be here with everybody. My name is Sheila Kruger, formerly head of global benefits at Zoom. The communications that I think have always been really special to me are when we can spread the word beyond the employee to their family. So letting the families know and understand what we're offering to their loved one at home and how that can be beneficial for the entire family. I think those are the things that are really have always kind of touched me.
How wonderful. Thank you. Rika, good to see you. Welcome.
Thank you, Manola. Happy to be here this morning. My name is Reka, and I have about 15 years of experience in the compensation, rewards, and people analytics space, most recently at Box. My favorite communication is definitely around pay and compensation. And that touches every single employee, and it's generally a little bit more technical and quantitative, and sometimes there's a sense of everything's being made, decisions are being made behind a black box. So I love democratizing that data and giving that getting that in the hands of employees in a way that's easy to understand and digest. So I love getting it out there.
Thank you so much. Adelia, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. It's really nice to be here. My name is Adelia Surmekin, and I'm the Senior Director for Total Rewards at the Jackson Lab. Communication, I think the ones that I get really excited about are the ones that tell employees their value, that showcases, hey, here's what you've done in the year. Here's how you've made an impact. Here's, how we've appreciated what you've done throughout the year. I think those ones always, they get me excited because at the end of the day, without the people, right, nothing gets done. So I like those messages.
Thank you. And last but not least, Dr. Brandy, good to see you again. It's been what, almost a week?
Yeah, good to see you too. And hi to my fellow panelists. So my name is Brandy Fennell, and I'm the Director of Organizational Development and Culture for Founders Table. And the communications that really kind of inspire me and drive me the most, or energize me the most rather, are the employee spotlights that we do, the ones that showcase the diverse skills and personalities that contribute to the entire culture of our organization. I think sharing those stories of achievements and setbacks and triumphs of all those who've walked the path similar to you or before you can really be inspiring and motivating for the employee base.
What a wonderful first round of answers, and it makes me think that we should be thinking about a full series on HR messaging and how HR just spreads information and knowledge and energy throughout the organizations. Now, before we get very, very deep into the topic, if we look at the past 2-3 years, if we look at our realities today, I am sure that you all have some perspective on how communication has changed, on how communication needs has changed within organizations, on how HR's space for communication has changed. So I would invite all of you, if we can take just a couple of minutes and look at how HR messaging has changed and what is it called to deal with at the moment. And what I will do, I always go diagonally. I don't know why, but I will ask Rika to lead us into this. And then you all know the drill. The unmuting competition will be officially open, and just build your own conversation as we move along. So, Rika.
Okay, happy to start us off on this question. So I am in the compensation space, and in the last few years, the importance of communication around pay has become so much more important than ever before, because we have pay transparency now. We have legislation in several states in the US. There's more coming across the US, and in Europe, they're going to take it 10x that legislation. And the transparency that we're talking about is what we've never seen before. So today's compensation professional has to be almost like as good at the analytical and quantitative skills as the actual communication skills, because it's no longer just like what you're doing from a compensation perspective, it's how you're telling people about it, your employees about it. And managers have never really had to have those tough conversations directly with employees around pay. The decisions were generally made once a year and then kind of communicated to employees. There was a statement, sometimes not even a statement, given to employees. And now, in the state of California, employees can ask for their pay range at any time. And upon request, by law, we're supposed to give it to them. And this can't just be like, here's a set of numbers. Like, managers have to take that opportunity to have that dialogue with employees to really explain how pay is set, be transparent in how an employee can control their movement in pay and things like that. So for the first time, we've now had to enable managers to have these conversations. So this is a big shift. So in the past, when I was looking for people to hire on my compensation team, I would be looking for highly analytical, quantitative people. But now the skill set is shifting. And to be successful in the comp world, you have to be able to do both, like be a really good communicator. So this is new for us. And I think we're all kind of building this muscle right now. So yeah, that's a big shift in the rewards and the comp space.
Thank you so much. And that also answers, we had a question early on in the comments right after your introduction to really look at the pay-related comp. So thank you so much, Reka, for starting us off. Sheila, I see you unmuted.
I did. I think, and Reka, great comments. I've done compensation work as well, and I know that's a really difficult message to send. It seems like no one's ever happy, no matter what you write. And the last few years of my career have been really focused on the benefits side of total rewards. And I think, 20 years ago, I can remember sending out, letters to people's homes to explain their choices for open enrollment. Let's use that as an example. And they were pretty limited 20 years ago. It was mostly medical, dental, vision. Maybe you had an HSA and an FSA and not a lot of things to make big decisions around. But over the years, I think that's become increasingly complex. And there's a proliferation of point solutions that employers offer. And we offer them because we want people to take advantage of them and use them to really make their lives better. And so I think it's gotten really important that we're able to provide content to people that's easily understood, gives them their next steps, explains the whole process. And to the comment about, letting them know their value, letting them understand that, these are provided to you to give you the flexibility to run your benefits program for you and your family. So I think it's just really, we talk a lot in communications about storytelling, and I think that's gotten more and more important, using personas, using, those kinds of things in our communications to say, hey, if this kind of fits you, this is maybe some things you're going to want to look at so that you're not overwhelming people with, all the solutions that you're able to provide.
Who wants to go next? Dipti.
Yeah, this whole conversation reminds me of the COVID time where all of us were remote. We did not know what was happening. We ourselves were grappling with our own personal challenges, but had to be present for all of the employees and fine-tune communication, think on your feet. Like, I never thought there would be a phase where I'd be trying to figure out where people would get oxygen and compile a list of all of those places and just be available for individuals to just come by and have a conversation online. So being available on different channels of communication was something that I don't remember having done much before because we were in office. But now with a hybrid model you are available to employees online and you are there to listen to what they have to say. And fine-tuning and thinking on your feet was something that wasn't there earlier, and now it is. And as people are getting back, they're still grappling with a lot of challenges. So just being present and helping them out on a one-on-one basis is also becoming really important.
Dr. Brandy.
Thank you. I agree with all the statements that have been made so far. I think with a growing recognition that effective communication contributes directly to employee satisfaction, engagement, and retention, then HR messaging has shifted and needs to continue to shift from a purely transactional and policy focused type of approach to a more holistic approach centered around enhancing the overall experience, whatever that means, right? So if you think about the advancements in technology, HR now has the capability to personalize and customize messages to cater to the individual employee and their needs and their preferences, right? So you can think about factors such as their role, their career stage, and even their personal interests as ways to enhance, engagement. And I think with, digital communication tools and platforms and how they're transforming the way that we communicate as an HR organization. So you have social media and instant messaging and other collaborative platforms that are now really integral to HR messaging strategies, because now you can communicate and interact in real time with employees. And I also think with even there needs to be a growing emphasis on diversity and inclusion. Our HR messaging has to become more mindful of the importance of inclusive language and content, to make sure that we're promoting a sense of belonging for all employees as well.
Adelia.
What I actually was going to hone on was the very last thing she just talked about, which is, probably pre-COVID, it was just, here's what HR wants you to know. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are, or what you're doing. Here's what HR wants to tell you, and that's it. But now, it's changed, and we all have to be mindful of how is this, email, how is this communication from HR being inclusive? How is it considering the different type of employees that it's supposed to, to speak to? So I think that really, in my opinion, is one of the biggest changes in communication. Being able to make sure that your entire audience can see themselves in what you're saying.
I was sitting here listening to all your answers, and I have a gut feeling that audience awareness is an HR superpower. And I would invite Dr. Brandy. I really loved how you framed your insight around inclusive language and around creating this sense of belonging. So I would invite you to lead us into this slice of the conversation around how can HR use audience awareness as its superpower?
Oh, thanks for putting me on the spot. HR knows so much about the employee base, right? We have access to all the data, right? And we also know everything that's going on behind the scenes that employees don't know. So I think HR needs to just be more readily able to put themselves in employee shoes, right? And consider, like, it's okay to give employees information. It's okay to share knowledge. We don't have to be hoarders of it, of the information. It's okay to share it. And sharing is empowering. Sharing gives your employees a sense of, I want to say ownership, but also it gives them the what's in it for me. Like, why should I be engaged in this organization? Why should I care? Why should I contribute? Why should I go above and beyond? I don't even know what, holidays are going to be on the calendar this year. Like, that's silly, right? So I think HR just adopts a more transparency type of motto, I guess, to how they communicate would work best. Like right now, we don't really have an internal communications person. I'm that person for our organization, and prior to that, there was really no one doing it, and so that's just kind of been my approach. It's like, oh, let our employees know this, or do our employees know this? Why don't they know this? They should know this, right? And just asking those questions make people like, well, why would we tell them that? It's like, why wouldn't we tell them that, right? And so I think that's where it starts, is just being more transparent and not being a hoarder, sharing information. Sharing is caring, right? And sharing is wealth, right? And if you want employees to really be bought into what your organization is about and what your mission is, then they need to be able to make conscious decisions with all the information. So,
Thank you. Sheila.
Yeah, I think this is such an interesting question, because I agree with Dr. Brandy. We should know who our people are, but we don't always, because they're not always vocal. They don't always, we can sort them and parse them out with our data, but we don't really know what's going on inside of their heads. And certainly I don't think anybody has, well, maybe there's a few companies that ask, what's your preferred method of communication when you come on board with company? But for the most part, we aren't really sure what's keeping them up at night, all those kinds of things. So I think it's really nice to have, a tool or a methodology to be able to poll the employees and find out what's top of mind for you in this sphere, right? Here's the universe we have control over in the total rewards area or in the HR area. And what are the things that are keeping you up at night? So I'm a really big believer in surveys and polls, and then using that data to best focus the message so that you can laser point to the different groups. And I know I mentioned in my last response about personas, and I do think those are really an important tool for us to use in communications, because, we're never going to have, if you have 5,000 employees, you have 5,000 personas, right? But you can probably parse those down into the most relevant that are there. And so I think using those surveys to help find out from people, what is your preferred method of contact? What's important to you? Also, then I think making sure that we're talking to the managers and leaders and finding out what are they hearing, because those messages don't always get to HR. So let's make sure we're talking and having those same conversations with managers and leaders and hearing what people are having to say and what their concerns and issues are, so that we are able to tailor those messages to the audience that most needs to hear them. And maybe that's not always the entire company. Sometimes it's, you're having an uprising in engineering and you need to really focus on how do you explain this to engineers. That's a completely different message than it is, to a group of salespeople. Like communication to those two groups, completely different. So just having an idea of who they are, hearing what their concerns are, and making sure that you're able to address those with every new communication that comes out. Oh, here's something new, but we remember this is the kind of stuff they're going to be thinking about when we say this. So we want to make sure that we're getting into all of that historical knowledge as well.
Who wants to go next? Just feel free to unmute and jump into the conversation. Adelia, are you looking for the unmute, or am I seeing things?
I found it. Yeah, I was looking for my mute button. Well, I think to Sheila's point, right? While you can't know every person in the organization, surveys are very key. And what I would add to the fact of surveys is the anonymity that comes with a survey. Very often, if you throw out surveys and everybody knows, they're going to know that I asked for this, or they're going to know that I said this, you're not likely to get a lot of what you're looking for. One of the things that I do in Total Rewards is every month we send out, a little blurb of here's what employees should focus on. But within that blurb is always a survey. Tell us whatever you want us to know. And what we've noticed, over the years is you hear feedback about everything and all things. But as time goes by, you're able to then sift through it and see a common theme, which normally they may not have highlighted. But okay, here's my opportunity. I'll just throw it in there. So throughout the course of the year, you see things that are important to employees that HR otherwise would not have thought about. But now we can take that away. And again, right, we now have a better view of our audience. We now can craft messages better. So definitely, looking at how you bring in information is what I would say is really key, to HR being able to be aware of their audience, be able to target the communication that goes out so it has the impact you're looking for. Because I think it was to Dr. Brandy's point, you can't know everything, but as much as you can get from employees, and in most cases in a covert way. So which means it's not in front of a large audience. It's not where their name is going to be known. There's a lot of information in there that usually HR doesn't focus on, because most of the time when we want to hear from employees, we send out a survey that has please put in your department, please put in your title. Well, I don't want to complete that because now or it's at the town hall and we say, submit the question. Well, my manager's here. I don't want to ask that question there. So I think that's something that, HR definitely needs to look into as well.
Rika.
So yeah, I've been +1 to surveys and trying to get the employee sentiment through that mode. But I also lead people analytics. So one of the things that I try to do is get an idea of some of this sentiment just kind of based on what I'm seeing in the data and trends. So for example, when we look at something like attrition or engagement, I will always try to look at it from different, kind of segmenting the population. So if I see there's a certain group, for example, females of one race are attriting at a higher rate than the average attrition rate of the organization, that's telling me something right there without necessarily doing the survey or whatever. I'm seeing a trend here. The last 3 quarters, this particular group has been leaving the organization higher rate than the average attrition rate of the organization. Is there something there that I need to go and dig into and maybe tailor a message to that group, or try to understand if there's something that's missing for them? I've also started looking at engagement, attrition, and all of those outcomes by hybrid workers, office workers, remote workers, to try to kind of see if there's anything that the data patterns are telling me. So those are the ways to kind of get at trying to understand if there's some messaging or some sort of different treatment needed based on that specific target of the audience, segment of the audience.
Dipti.
Yeah, to add to that, I've been working in a lot of smaller organizations. So I do have the luxury of knowing a lot of the employees and meeting them in person. One of the things is focus groups, to be able to understand what is really happening. Is there something that we're missing? Is there something that we can do better, leveraging managers to be able to get the message across as well? And the one thing that overwhelms me and my team is that we're not branding specialists, but somehow the entire process of communicating lands up with us, where we may not have the resources nor the expertise to be able to craft the best message out there, and in a beautifully designed poster. So I land up taking the help of our benefits providers and our partners to be able to chip in and help us. And there are ways in which HR can get very effective at doing it if you only reach out and get help from the other partners that you have, to be able to tailor and craft messages that are inclusive and address different audience and their needs as well.
Well, the next question comes from a few separate sources of inspiration. I really loved, and I hope my memory is not failing me. Sheila, you were the one in the very first round where you mentioned HR messaging reaching all the way into the families of the employees. Then I see an amazing comment from Emily in the chat. How is HR messaging targeted or customized within the polarized environments with global complexities? And I cannot help but think back either to previous Hacking HR panels and even some of the conversations that I've been having lately around people experience, which is beyond employee experience. So I would really invite all of you, and Sheila, I'm going to ask you to lead us into this because you sparked the initial thought around this question. When we think about audience awareness, how do we keep ourselves mindful and intentional with being aware outside of the immediate organization that we are serving as HR practitioners for? So how is this for the communities around where our organization is being active at a global level? How do you see audience awareness outside of the core organization? Sheila.
Oh boy, that's a big question. I agree. It has become very difficult. And I think, we're all people first, right? All of us have our own feelings about things. I would imagine if we had a show of hands, there's not anybody in this entire conversation on the panelist side or the participant side that's not had to deliver a message they didn't agree with. I think we've all had to do that, and that is never fun. And so it does kind of bring home that, how do we talk about, this isn't just about our relationship as employer employee. This is really maybe something that's, affects more than that. And I think one of the things that kind of brings that home to me is talking about employee giving programs. That's always, not everybody has them, but we were lucky enough to have one at Zoom. And that could often bring a lot of controversy, depending on who the C-suite had decided to focus on. Because for every side, there is another person that says, that's not how I believe, that's not what I want to do. And I think during the pandemic, all of our social instances and experiences were very heightened because we had, kind of one place to be, and that was home with the TV on and learning and listening to NPR or listening to whatever and hearing all this stuff going on. So I think it's really important to make sure that as you're delivering that message, you are aware of there being two sides to every story and that not everyone's going to appreciate the focus that you're bringing. And that, I think, expands into everything. But I think that community giving is probably one of the things that can be more of an issue with you. So I think it's really a matter of trying to be as neutral as possible. Here's what we've decided to do, offering options for people. Maybe this isn't your thing. There's other available options for you to look at, and just really trying to focus on all of the opportunities that employee has to make the impact that they want to make in the world, however they want to make it. So also, I think not back on community giving and activity and participation is not forcing people to do something that is against their beliefs just because that's going to make the company look good. Like if you want to volunteer for an organization and somebody says, that's a great organization. Yeah, they do some good work, but I have some issues with maybe some of their policies and I don't want to do that. Then it's got to be perfectly acceptable for them to not participate as well. So I think just always looking at that dichotomy and making sure that you're focusing on it and understanding that you've got to offer options for people who this maybe isn't for them. Give them the option, give them the opportunity, and make sure that it's not a judgmental option.
Thank you so much. Who would like to follow?
I'll go. I think also HR just has to stay attuned to the broader environment, right? We have to employ strategies for continuous environmental scanning, so we have to know what's going on locally, nationally, globally, that could have implications for our employees, whatever that means. And I think this is where, if you don't already have someone who kind of focuses on diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging in HR, or you have it's separate from HR, you can partner with that group. But I think that's where this comes into play the most, when it comes to fostering an inclusive workplace culture, because you want to be able to equip employees with the tools to navigate conversations that can be sensitive, that stem from external events. And we all dealt with it, especially recently, from the war that's happening, the murder of George Floyd. There's so many instances where those things can't be ignored. They're affecting our employees and they're bringing it to work, right? So to ask them to keep it at home is not really allowing them to be their true selves, or to get that sense of relief, or feel like they're even cared about, right? Employees want to feel like they're cared about. They're not just another number or another person sitting behind a desk. So I think you definitely have to do that. And I think, offering different communication channels for that awareness. So, establishing the different communication channels that employees can use to speak out, or to ask questions, or to be educated on certain things that are affecting other employees, or if you're a manager, it's affecting your staff and you don't know how to answer it, right? Or how to approach the topic. So whether that's, intranet announcements, if you have an intranet, or some type of virtual forum, or if you have, a Slack channel or things like that, just some space where employees can express thoughts and concerns and ask questions.
I want to just jump back in because something you said, Dr. Brandy, makes me think about, you don't always get to test a message before you send it out, right? And so sometimes we've probably also all sent out a message where the response was negative. But I think if in the spirit of diversity and inclusion, using employee resource groups or ERGs to kind of test your message, especially when it's a message that maybe rotates around that particular group's like hot points and hot topics, and using those ERGs as a test group for your communication, and just talking to those leaders and those members and saying, hey, here's something we're going to do. How does this message sound? How does it hit your ear? Is there something we need to change? So that you're really making sure that you're, balancing, and maybe not just the one that it's like something that's near and dear to their heart, but something that maybe another group has that like they're kind of 10-foot polling that issue. And then you need to find out how's that group going to respond as well.
Dipti, I saw you looking. Oh, Adelia. Adelia, please go.
I was just going to add that, in terms of being sensitive to the community, depending on the size of your organization, a community relations section is usually very helpful. And it's not like a whole department. It's just key people, especially in organizations where you're in different states, which, half of the organization, regardless of how small you are, someone in your company has moved and is now suddenly somewhere else. So now you're multi-state, like it or not. But having individuals, right, who have an ear in the community so that they are there to inform leadership of, hey, here's what's important in the community where a lot of our employees are, right? And then when situations happen, it's easier for HR to work with that sort of department or section to say, hey, for this specific location, here are the resources they're going to need. Here are the things here's the kind of response we can give that, can make the employee feel like, yes, my company cares about what happened in this place that I live, right? And it also helps promote that, concept and branding of, look, we're an employer that cares about you beyond the 8 to 5, the 9 to 5. We care about what's happening after 5 o'clock, what affects, your family, your friends, and your entire community. So I think that's another thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, just building on what Sheila spoke about, I think some of the most successful messages and even policies that we write about is where it's guidelines and not where we're very rigid with what we expect our employees to do, or the way that they have to behave, or the process or the choice that they have to make. I think that in itself provides a relief to employees. One of the examples that I have is around social responsibility, where we have a very, very broad guideline. We don't dictate what causes you have to support. Whatever cause is important in your community, whatever cause that you feel strongly about, is what you should go ahead and support, and this is what the organization will do. Of course, there are guardrails that we'll put across all policies, that it has to be legal and everything else. But beyond that, providing that freedom where people don't have to come and justify why they chose what they chose, provides them with a safe environment to be able to make those choices and be able to make that difference in the community, is also something that works really well. So HR, I think, needs to know when to have a lot of guardrails and a lot of rules, and when to leave it as simple guidelines so everybody could follow them.
Reka.
Yeah, I'll just build upon everything that my fellow panelists have pretty much covered, but just plus one to what Deepti and Sheila have been saying, just kind of building that safe space. I think employees just want, I don't think they want every single, the employer to know every single thing that's going on or support every single thing that's going on, but at the same time, they don't want to feel like they can't express themselves, or they're being blocked in some way or something like that. So I think as long as there's a safe space that's provided where they know that they can bring their whole self to work and not have to hide some part of their life, that's important. And I think Dr. Brandy really highlighted the importance of having a DEI and B dedicated function, or at least a person in the organization who's really kind of focused on that. And when you have someone in that role, it's not just they're kind of working in isolation, like really integrating them into every part of your HR programs, your policies, your messaging, your communications, any mass communications, really getting them involved in that early on, and just bringing that lens. I think that's a really great way to go about it. And then Adelia mentioned states. I mean, global companies, it gets even more complex and complicated. We have a really large presence in Poland, and when the Ukraine war was happening, there were a lot of folks coming into Poland, and that was really impacting some of our employees in a very direct way. And so, just being mindful of that, and kind of having an HR team on the ground there really was helpful, because they were able to raise the voice and be the voice of the employee population there, and advocate for them and things like that. When we first got to Poland, we only were hiring engineers, and over time we built all the supporting functions and things like that. So I think that's key as well. Like if you have the site somewhere where you only have your engineers or technical talent, really being mindful of maybe getting someone there who's sort of an HR rep at some point once you have a certain number of employees, to bring those issues to light that you might be missing.
Well, we are about 11 minutes already into the second half of our conversation today. And I do have a question for all of you. What are some of the critical skills underpinning HR messaging? And most of you know me by now. I do have extra points for skills that are not necessarily immediately linked to messaging and comms. But if you can think of one or two, maybe each, I will give you some extra seconds to think about your answers, and I will welcome everybody who joined us over the past minutes or a little bit later. And before we start getting those questions, this conversation is being recorded, and you can always go back and re-listen or recommend it either through our LinkedIn space or from hackinghrlab.io. So what are the skills critical to tailoring HR messages for maximum impact? And I will ask you, Adelia, to lead us into this, and then everybody just add on.
Thank you. Some of the things that I would say are make it concise. I think very often when we write in HR, we want to say everything, and we're writing from a legal perspective of, okay, so the employee doesn't come back and say, we didn't put that in that section under that sub bullet. But we also have to recognize that our email, our messaging, whatever it is not the only thing the employee is going to see for that day. So we have limited time to get the attention. So we have to try as HR professionals when we write to be as concise as possible. Hit the main things you want employees to be aware of. Have your call to action there. The other thing is make it fun. Already an email coming from HR, communication from HR is already like, okay, what's the principal saying? No, just a little bit of, a nice visual to it, something that's friendly, something that's happy. Like really, at times I send out, I have this monthly series that I send out in the organization. And it focuses employees on, here's what we want to tell you this month. Out of everything you need to be aware of, just focus on this for this month. But at the beginning of it is always something fun. Like, oh, today's National Coffee Day. Oh, by the way, today's National Donut Day. Let employees smile before they read your email, right? The other thing also to be aware of is the timing. Again, it goes back to we need to check the box that we sent that email. But the time we're sending that communication, if it gets buried in anything else that's happening, there's zero impact. So HR needs to be aware of timing when we're sending emails. Make sure nothing else major is happening in the organization or maybe even outside the community, like we talked about, that can overshadow your email. So those would be the key ones that I would say, we should all be aware of as HR professionals when it comes to trying to craft a message that goes out and has the impact that we're looking for.
Love those. Who would like to follow? Rika?
Yeah, so when it comes to communicating around pay compensation, I think employees have two things in mind. They think it's either going to be very technical or that there's something that's going to be hidden in some way, right? That someone's trying to hide something from them. So my goal is to shift that. And so the two things that I'm trying to do is keep it simple and keep it like as transparent as we can be, or at least like ease that worry that we're trying to hide something here. We're trying to share with you everything that that we can, and our intention is not to hide something. Our intention is to be transparent and give you all the points that you need. So I think somehow in your messaging, easing that worry away, because whenever you want to talk about compensation, people kind of tense up. They either think it's going to be too technical, for example, with equity compensation and ESPP and things like that. People get really, they shut down. They think it's going to be too technical. It's going to be manuals of words and really complex program design and things like that. Or they think that the company's trying to hide something from them. So my goal is to just take those two pieces away, keep it simple, use plain English, use stories, use real like impact of how to think about compensation, and then also make them feel like we're not trying to hide anything here. We're here to share information.
Deepti, and then we go to Sheila.
Yeah, one is to know who needs the message. I remember having a conversation with one of the leaders, and I said, a few people are really wondering about XYZ. And the person was like, quantify few. Is it 10%? Is it 15%? Is it 50%? Does it require tailored communication to a specific group or a broader communication to the entire org? Like, what are we trying to solve? What are we trying to address? And that is something that I constantly think of when I'm building on the communication aspect of it. Who is this going to? Is it really relevant? And do I need to do it broad and wide, or do I need to make it specific? And the other is the channels of communication that you need to use. I think just being very focused on the different modes, understanding which ones are used the most. A lot of times I've heard individuals say that, oh, as soon as an HR email comes, we don't even open it, or we have a separate box. And we have a rule that we've already put into our mailbox that it should go into this folder. And if it's really something you want people to understand and you want them to act on, look at the channels of communication that they are active on. For example, a Slack channel. And do you want to get the message out there quick if it's meant for the larger group? So those are a couple of things that comes to mind.
Thank you. Sheila?
Yeah, I think the skill that I really think about that is so important that we sometimes miss is that we need to be marketers. We are selling a product, whether you want to call it that or not, in Total Rewards and HR, but specifically, I think in Total Rewards, we are looking for engagement. We are looking for feedback. We are looking for that understanding and making sure that transparency is felt. So I think it's really important to think about that message needs to land the way we want it to land on the employees. And if we're reaching out to family as well, then we need to make sure it's landing there the same way in a positive manner. So I think about a couple of things. One is last year, Instacart was able to get budget to hire a marketing person strictly attached to HR. Like, she made her own hire of a marketing person, and that person's only job is to effectively communicate HR benefits to Instacart employees. That's it. And that's a big win. I mean, I know how excited Maggie was when she got that budget, because she said, this is something that, you know, we all do as part of our jobs, but this is somebody who's now trained to actually know how to get that message to land where we want it to land. And that was huge. And I think the other thing that we need to think about is, you know, how can we do some of this out of the box? Because we know, yes, employees expect an email from HR. They expect it to be boring. They expect it to not always be good news. So there are definitely, as Deepti said, people who have their inboxes trained to just everything from HR goes right into a folder, and I never read it. Or if I do read it, I read the first 2 sentences and then I'm done. So there was just a survey, survey results put out by Workshop, an internal communication survey, that said the top 3 internal communication trends are manager communication. So making sure we're utilizing that channel of communication is important. Creating employee influencers, which I really love because I think it's so tied to everybody's desperate need for social media. And so if you've got that Slack channel or that chat channel or whatever that is, if you can bring some of those everyday employees who aren't HR people into the fold and say, hey, you know, if this is something and I would do this at Zoom. Somebody would tell me about, oh my gosh, I really love this benefit. It's been so wonderful for me and for my family. It's like, hey, would you just drop something in the chat and tell people to check it out? And it's super effective, because we do all have employees in our organization that are absolutely influencers of others. And so utilizing those people. And then the third thing was just providing some thought leadership. So even though, you know, 95% of the employees aren't really going to care, but if you can provide valuable information about what's happening in the world, around HR, around your area of your center of excellence, and you want to put that out there for people to have it, you know, there are going to be people that read it, and maybe those people then turn into your influencers that are like, oh my gosh, they're being very thoughtful about this. This isn't just like, let's just get it out there and check off the box. They are really thinking about how this will affect us and how it will impact the company and our families.
Thank you so much. Dr. Brandy.
I mean, that was so good. I don't know what else I can add to all of that. So maybe I'll just give the boring answer from a perspective of an IO psychologist. I think, you know, empathy is as a critical skill. You have to have that understanding, acknowledgement of emotions, experience of employees when you're communicating with them, to make sure you're communicating with care and concern, right? Especially during any challenge situations or any organizational changes. I also, and I think I said this already before, but having some cultural competence as well, and that'll, you know, enable you to navigate diverse perspectives when you're communicating. That's in a way that's inclusive and respectful of varying backgrounds. I also think storytelling ability is very important. You know, like, you know, as many people have said, you know, people tend to think HR is going to be boring. I'm going to be reprimanded. I'm going to be, you know, it's going to be long. And so being able to have that concise message, like Adelia said, but also something that tells a compelling story, right? Where you can convey a message that's memorable and relatable, I think is really powerful as well. And, you know, so someone who can be creative. But I also have like 3 things that I think are a little bit outside of the box that I don't think anyone thinks of. But I think someone, you know, having some type of psychological safety advocacy, I think is important. And in communications. And you have to be able to communicate in a way that encourages open dialogue and ensures people feel safe with expressing their thoughts and concerns. And even having some, you know, what I like to call behavioral economics insight, right? You have to be able, your messaging has to be designed to influence positive behavior. You know, so being able to understand how employees make decisions and utilize strategies that encourage the desired actions, whether that's taking a training or participating in a company initiative, like you have to be able to do that. And I just probably just some overall like group dynamics proficiency, like understanding the dynamics of group behavior, I think is critical for HR professionals in this internal communication space, especially if it's something that's, when it comes to like organizational announcements, you have to be able to leverage your knowledge to enhance team cohesion and collaboration and those type of things. So
wonderful, wonderful skills, and I consider that I gave away all my extra points for skills on this round. Now we are 6 minutes away from wrapping this conversation up. Let's park 1 minute for the wrap up, and maybe let's take maximum 1 minute each. And if we can look at one, maybe two allies or cross-functional Wi-Fi boosters for HR messaging that we can think about within the organizations. And I would really, really love if you could put a particular spin on who can be allies for HR messaging for those people in the audience who are an HR function of one, when having these teammates outside of your function becomes even more critical. So Deepti, I will ask you to lead us into this. Let's maybe take maximum 1 minute each and see where we go.
The leadership team, the managers, I think are your allies, especially when it comes to communicating messages to the employees or even influencing their peers. I remember doing a training program on performance management and talking about the tool. And after I spoke about the tool, I had one of the leaders come in and talk about how that tool has helped them manage their team members' performance. And all the other managers were probably more alert and active during that conversation. And I could feel that just hearing it from somebody who belongs to their groups made a lot of sense to them, and they were more receptive to that conversation. So I think the leadership and managers are going to be your biggest allies when you're talking about HR.
Thank you. Who wants to go next?
Oh, I'll go. I'll say two departments, IT and marketing. You know, IT can help with implementing and maintaining, you know, the communication platforms and, you know, making sure that secure delivery of HR messages, right? And then marketing, because, you know, marketing is always external facing, right? But to Sheila's point earlier, we have to have people on the inside doing internal communications that also have those same skills and abilities and can help with like branding your internal communications and design and things that are going to be creative and you know, just sexy really for your employees, so they'll want to open the email, you know. So
Wonderful. Rika.
Yeah, I also always have our internal communications team work with them very closely to look at anything that's going out to employee facing, just in terms of branding, being consistent. Sometimes they can just take the message, and they're experts at this, and so they can really amplify the message or change the words and just the look and feel of it. So really rely on them, because that's not a capability that my team. So definitely rely on them for that. Internal comms. And then to what Deepti said, leadership team.
I think Reka is having some connectivity issues. Sheila.
Yeah, I absolutely check on the internal comms team. They can be one of your best allies most of the time. Sometimes it feels like maybe they're not, and it's kind of an interesting, I think, dynamic, but great team. But the other one is your vendors. If you have, now this may not apply as much on the comp side, but in benefits, you've got vendors as well that are, you know, an entire team of people that are marketing this particular product. So you should also rely on them. And remember, when that email comes from you, it's going into that folder, right? Nobody's reading it. If it comes from the internal comms team, they can send it from the company-wide email. There's one that's always going to land in the email box. And same with the vendor. It's going to land right in the email box, and it's going to get read or at least looked at before it's, you know, pushed aside. So using those two, I think, are really important.
Adelia.
Sheila, you owe me for throwing out the vendors, because that was my vendor one. But yes, in terms of the vendor, what I would expand on there is the fact that the vendors can also reach family, right? And they can reach employees when they're not focused on their work inbox. So your vendors can probably help you send out postcards, flyers, things that they can read when they're not stressed, staring at their computers. So definitely leverage your vendors if you have them. Of course, echo again, internal communications, they can help you. Then whatever system you're using, your HR system, we use Workday, and there's a lot that you can just customize and push out to all employees. So that's another tool to use. And to, something we had talked about earlier are what we call site champions. So if you're an organization that you're in different locations, or even if it's just one place within the different departments, they're individuals who can influence everybody else. So try to get their buy-in into whatever messaging you're trying to, disseminate to employees. And I think that's another good way to, just create that impact from the back office.
Thank you all so very much. It is literally painful to say that we ran out of time, and I feel that this conversation could have easily gone on for at least 1 more hour. Now, a very, very quick wrap up. I took a look at the title of our panel. I realized we didn't talk about maximum impact that much. So I would ask your help to leave this conversation on a high note. Think about what maximum impact of tailored HR messaging looks like in one word. In one word, what do we have across the organization and beyond when the tailored HR messaging has reached maximum impact? What I will do, the same as we started, the e-mic will go clockwise, but I will give you just a few more seconds to think about your one word for maximum impact while I thank everybody in the audience for taking the time and the headspace to be here with us. I hope you enjoyed it. There are so many more conversations coming over the next days. So, Dipti, good to go. Maximum impact in one word.
Action.
Thank you so much. Sheila.
Response.
Rika.
Trust.
Adelia.
Retention.
And Dr. Brandy.
Commitment.
Dipti, Sheila, Rika, Adelia, Dr. Brandy, it was a joy, it was a privilege. I enjoyed this so, so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you, everybody, for watching us or listening. And thank you so much, Jessa, for taking care of us. And enjoy the rest of the week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.